Hey y'all, it's been a bit. So, like I said, I'm not going to be making a lot of promises about frequency, but I did want to catch up on what I read in February and March, and I am going to be doing the Battle of the Bands readathon in April, so I had a plan, and I've already read 2 different books than the ones I planned, so I will just do a wrap-up of that. I feel like I can share what I had planned, and it's completely different. So, all right. So I'm going to just go through. There were, I think, 14 or 15 books. So, yeah. All right. The first one I read was Under the Dome by Stephen King, which was one that I swapped with Sir Chong. And this book I did not like. There's a lot of things I didn't like about it. He has a tendency to do a really bad job of writing women, and they seem to only exist to be abused, raped, or, produce babies, and they're all ridiculously hot, and they all somehow are attracted to these, mediocre guys. So I don't know. That's not great. And that continued. It opened with some pretty awful, violence against women, and there was a really brutal gang rape scene, and, I just didn't need any of that. But beyond that, honestly, my biggest problem with this book, and, this is a bit of a spoiler. It's not major spoiler, but, skip to the next book if you don't want to hear this. My biggest problem with this book, so if you have read it, is that the dome comes down, and within 48 hours, it is absolute Lord of the Flies chaos, which to me doesn't make any sense, because all of this is happening. They still have cell phones access, they still have internet, and they are watching the news and watching CNN, and they're seeing the coverage of their town. And to me, I just don't believe that people would go that far off the rails when there's still public perception of them. I get it. I get the idea. I'm as nihilistic as anyone, but the idea that, people are so naturally evil that given any kind of, as soon as you take the restraints off, they go into become animals. Fine, I can buy that, but I do think there should have been more of the dome came down, and then maybe, I don't know, skip to 4 months later or something, where things have started to unravel, or cut to quick scenes building to it. But it just kind of was this small town with less than 2,000 people who have known each other their whole lives, and will likely, everybody else in the world can see them. They have friends and family who are outside the dome and can see them, and then they're just going into this. I don't know. I didn't buy the whole plot, and it's way too long, because I don't know why, but Stephen King, he bloats his books. There was a lot in here that did not need to be in here. It was just unnecessary, so I did not like it, but hey, I read another 1,000-page book, so good for me. Then I read, and I actually read this recently. This is not in any particular order. I read The Wildelings, which I just finished going at the end of the month. I loved this. This was an arc, and, it's literary fiction. It's dark academia. So, that's pretty much, and it's also coming of age drama about adolescence and girls, and some of the struggles of growing up as a woman and as a girl. And so those are my favorite things. And so you combine literary fiction, dark academia, and coming of age stuff, and I'm very happy. And so and it was set in the 90s, so another thing, so that's pretty much everything I liked. It's about these 2 girls who grow up in Ireland, and then they go off to college, and it's kind of their friendship, and then sort of how, the dynamic changes and other things that happen, kind of coming to terms with things that have happened. And what I found really interesting is a lot of the reviews were talking about how the main character was so unlikable and so awful, and she's flawed, but she's also like, I thought she was a very realistic young woman, and I very much related to her, so I guess I'm a horribly unlikable human being. But I just found her very real. And was she flawed? Of course. And some of the things that she did, you're just like, oh, don't do that. But I thought every single thing she did was so, like, while not being, I guess, logical, was realistic and appropriate for the situation. So, you know, no, I don't mean like morally appropriate or a good decision, but I just think if you take, you know, okay, realistically, this type of character in the situation, this is probably more often than not, or at least a significant portion of the time, you would see very similar reactions. So I loved it. I just thought it was beautifully written. Again, it's literary fiction, so if, you know, I know a lot of people on booktube and stuff don't actually like literary fiction, so I just note that, because it's, you know, I wouldn't say nothing happens, but it's very similar to Secret History, where it's really character driven. It kind of had like elements of Great Gatsby and Separate Peace in there as well, and all of those are 5-star books for me, so obviously this one was going to be. And while also having a really strong narrative voice that was unique. So I loved it. I just really, really loved this book. So it comes out, I think, in later this month. So I definitely recommend it, but I preface it with, this is literary fiction. So I know that's not for everyone. Then I read John Dies at the End, which was another book from Sir Chonk, and I liked this one more than Under the Dome, but the problem was I thought I was going to love this, because when I started it, the first couple chapters, I was like hysterically laughing. I was really loving it. And then it just kind of started to be like, why is this book like 400 or 500 something pages? Like, it just started to be like, okay, great, it's wacky, there's all this weird stuff happening, hilarious, but eventually it just started to feel like, okay, this could be shorter, because I feel like we're just kind of running in the same circles and the same things over and over, and you can only be so wacky for so long before it's just kind of boring. So I did end up giving it like, I think, a 3-star. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I thought the sense of humor was funny. And there were a lot of things I did like. I mean, there were some things I didn't, you know. It wasn't published that long ago for some of the language that was used. And there were parts where, like, these alien creatures or whatever were using very, like, vulgar language and, like, slurs. And I was like, I can't even handle that, because, like, obviously that's just their... It was a way for, like, this, basically this, like, body snatcher kind of, for you to tell that the person was kind of possessed by this, you know, whatever. So, like, that didn't bother me as much as, like, the narrator, like, just using, in particular, the R word, like, repeatedly. Like, the first time it was very jarring, and I, like, double-checked to see when it was published, and I was like, okay, it was, like, after 2000, so, like, what are we doing? I know it, like, that was still a while ago, but come on. And then it just continued on, and I know we are currently in a society where that's, like, fine, but it's not really fine, and so yeah, I don't know. It just kind of, that wouldn't have, like, I mean, it might have, if I loved the book overall, I would have still made a note of it. It wouldn't have changed my rating though. Like, the reason I gave it a mid-grade rating is mostly just because I felt it was too long for the type of book it was, and the humor just eventually just got kind of repetitive for me. So, again, that, you know, but I do warn about that, because, you know, some people get very sensitive to it. So, then I read All the Colors of the Dark, which was the first book in my 50 books to read before I was 50, I think, that I read, or maybe second. And this was all right. Like, there were things I really liked about it. Some of the writing was really good, but in some places it felt like trying too hard to be, like, literary, and I don't know. And the overall plot, like, parts of it were really great, and I loved it. And then there were parts that I just felt like were not as good. And so I ended up being disappointed. It's not a bad book by any means. I just felt like there were things that just didn't click for me as much as I was hoping they would. And I think this was another read with Jenna. I mean, again, I liked it, and I thought there were good parts, but I thought it was a little, like I said, the writing was maybe trying a little bit too hard, and, but, you know, it was good, and I can understand why people really love it. I just, you know, I didn't love it as much as I would have liked. Then I read Notes on Surviving the Fire. This was also an arc, and the thing is with this book is I thought this was going to be a 5-star. I loved it. I was, like, really into it, and then I just felt like the sort of, like, last, I guess, like, 20% or so, I didn't like the direction it went. It felt a little too neat, and I mean, I'm very particular with, like, books about trauma and books about, like, anything literary. Like, I kind of like, I don't want to say, like, miserable, but I like realistic. And so when things feel a little too bookish, you know, trying to wrap things up in a booky way, I don't really like it as much. So it was a little bit disappointing, but I still thought it was very good. And I am definitely going to, you know, keep an eye out for more books by this author, and I still would recommend it. You know, and for some people, I think they will like the things that maybe I didn't as much. So on like a side tangent, just to kind of give you a sense of like when I talk about like the types of things I really love, like the Wildelings, like kind of reminded me. So I just recently finished Adolescence on Netflix, and it was like a gut punch. I mean, it was so intensely emotional, and it's very ambiguous in parts, and like the stuff that's connected is connected, but not in like the traditional way you usually see in like TV. You know, usually it's like things get wrapped up in a certain way, and there are like a lot of sort of, I don't want to say loose ends. I mean, I think the story is told effectively, but I do think like it's a little different than what maybe a lot of people are used to, and I loved it. I mean, I love that kind of brutal authenticity. Like, I just felt like the writing and the acting just felt so true. And that's kind of where I end up, you know, that's what can make a difference for me is like, I can love a book or I can really enjoy a book. But if there's anything that I feel like kind of goes off of that, like just pure, like brutal honesty, I tend to just find it I mean, again, depends on the type of book. I mean, obviously, if it's just like a fun book, I mean, I'm not waiting for John dies at the end to be brutally honest, you know, or even a Stephen King book. But when I'm reading like more literary stuff, like, so that tends to affect me, you know, whether I'm totally love the book or I end up being like, 4, or like All the Colors of the Dark. I mean, I think I gave that a 3. I might have even given it a 2. I don't know. I liked a lot of parts of it, and then I liked a lot of parts I didn't like. Okay, so then I read You Were Fatally Invited. This was another arc. This was, I mean, I don't want to say dumb. It wasn't terribly dumb, but it was also like this was not like, you know, again, this is not literary. This was just fun. It's people who get invited to an island and then they start getting killed off one by one, you know, like I love that kind of stuff. And so I thought it was interesting. It was entertaining. You know, honestly, I read it so long ago. I read it in February, and like I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I did enjoy it. So there's that. Then I read The One by John Mars, which honestly was very disappointing to me. This was like such a cool concept. So it's basically that people take this test to find out who the one person is for them, like their soulmate, basically scientifically. And I was just like, oh, that's got such a cool concept. And there'll be, you know, all this like sort of dark dystopian stuff. And I don't know, it just was kind of a romance novel and with like a little bit of darker stuff. I mean, there was a serial killer, and, you know, that obviously is not a romance novel, but I mean, it just was like too much about like just these people. And it wasn't like character study, like relationship stuff. It was just like, how are these relationships working out? So it was disappointing to me. I thought it was going to be, kind of more of a sci-fi sort of techno thriller kind of thing, and it just didn't. It wasn't. So I know a lot of people really liked it, and I get why. I mean, it wasn't terribly written or anything, but I just was really disappointed. And then, speaking of disappointment, I read Beautiful Ugly, which is the newer Alice Feeney, and this honestly was terrible, and I don't understand because I love Alice Feeney so much, and I was so frustrated with this book because for most of the book, I had this whole thing figured out. I was going down this rabbit hole of Celtic mythology and all these things that I thought were going on. And it just turned out the sort of explanation of it was really dumb. and so I think I feel like what happened was she wrote the book and it had a very Catriona Ward kind of feel to it. And I think, she went a little, out there. And I honestly feel like her editor or whatever basically was like, well, this isn't your brand, and we can't sell it this way, so make it, make sense. And so she had this, ending that was just so dumb and nonsensical. And I just didn't understand why she did that, And so I was kind of it was so disappointing. So I did not like it, unfortunately. It's Alice Feeney. I'm not going to give up on her, but I was very, very disappointed. And then I read Dating and Dragons, which is the sequel to Dungeons and Drama. I wouldn't say it's a sequel. It's it's not even the same characters or the same, group of people. It's just, it's also about gaming and relationships. And so, I liked this one. I didn't like it as much as Dungeons and Drama because, that was about musical theater and gaming, and this was just about gaming. So, it was still good, though. It was about a girl who moved to this new town, and she wanted to be a part of this, D&D group, and one of the D&D group rules was you couldn't date in the group, and of course she has a crush on one of the boys, and he likes her, and so, there was that. And then, it was still plenty fun. I still really enjoyed it, and I will read anything else in this series, because I just thought they're really cute, they're really light, and they're refreshing. I always get in this argument with my husband if I had romance, and I don't mind romance. I just don't like the over the top stuff. And so I think YA cutesy romance is kind of my thing. It's not melodramatic. It's just cute. And also the last thing in the world I want to do is read about people's graphic sexual escapades. And so I don't know. It's just not for me. All right. So this was cute though. I really liked it. And then I read The Wood at Midwinter, which is just kind of a short fairy tale by Susanna Clarke. And it's very short, but beautiful. And her writing is just phenomenal. And honestly, at this point, I don't care. I just want her to write more. And she has written, I think, 2 books, a short story, and a collection of short stories in 20 something years. And of course it took me almost all that time to read any of her books, but last year I read both Piranesi and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I loved them both so much. And now I'm okay, Susanna Clarke, please write some more books, which is kind of ridiculous because I've had all this time. But anyway, I still need to read The Ladies of Grace Adieu, which is her short story collection. And then I will have read everything she has. And so, all right. And then I read The Other People, and this honestly was probably one of the worst books I have ever read. And I'm not going to even, I just honestly, I hated it. But if there's a movie, and again, this is a spoiler, and I'm not really going to say much more, but there is a B movie. So it's compared to Shutter Island, which no, Shutter Island is amazing. This is not. There is a B movie that came out in, I think, the early 2010s or the late aughts or whatever. I think, yeah, it was somewhere around there. This is literally the same plot. It is the same story, and the narration is awful. I found it grating. The plot was nonsense. Like, this should have been amazing. It was, people trapped into place and blah, blah, and, being killed off. I love that kind of stuff. I hated this book. Like I said, I mean, it was just a ripoff of a bad movie. And, I mean, honestly, the mental health commentary, just awful. Everything about it, the narration, the writing style, just... It's honestly probably in my 10 worst books I've ever read. So, and I don't generally, like, when I dislike a book, it's usually just, this wasn't for me. Like, this one I, like, actively disliked. All right, so I have a couple more. The next one I really enjoyed this month, which was, this last couple months, which was We Used to Live Here. And this is horror, and it's actual horror. Like, I'm really into, like, metaphorical horror and stuff like that. And I mean, I guess there's some possible elements of that. It's very similar. I don't want to say it's very similar, but it's similar-esque to House of Leaves in the, like, if you just took the part with the house. Obviously, it's not all the other stuff, but, so there's all this, like, weird kind of stuff that's also going on, and there's, like, some sci-fi elements, but honestly, it was just so unsettling. Like, it was just one of those horror books that was actually creepy, and I really enjoyed it. I was just like, wow, this was creepy. I was, like, engaged. I couldn't wait to keep reading. So I really enjoyed it, and it was, like, yeah, it was very creepy and unsettling, and I like that in horror. All right, and then I read the first trade paperback of Murder Kingdom. I really like Mad Cave Studios. I think they're doing some really cool stuff in comics. This one was okay. I mean, it was basically yet another sort of, like, people being murdered at a clearly not Disney World, but Disney World, kind of place. And it was fine, but I was like, I've seen it before. And so I think that was just the thing, is, like, it didn't do anything new necessarily. I mean, maybe it might be new in comics, but plot wise, I mean, I feel like I've just seen a million, like, parodies of Disney and people getting killed in Disney and the evil of Disney, and, so, I mean, it was good. It was fine. Like, I didn't hate it or anything. I just, right now, I'm so far behind in my comics. I actually own the first couple issues of this, and so I was really excited to get, like, the arc of the trade, because I was like, oh, good, I can just read the whole trade right now and not have to try to dig up the issues. But the thing is, like, it's, at this point, I am, like, years behind on reading comics, and so I'm only really reading a couple series, and, like, to start something new, it's gotta blow me away, like, for me to invest too much into it, so I wouldn't continue with it, because I'm just, like, yeah, I'm just trying to not add more to my list, because I haven't read Saga since it came back, and that's, like, I love it. It's one of my favorites. I didn't even read the last few issues of Once and Future, which I love. I have them just sitting around waiting to be read. I read the first, I think, like, 6 issues or so of Department of Truth, which I loved, and I now have, like, another 20 or something to read, so, and I think I have, like, 2 years of, like, Nightwing to read. And so I am a little bit behind in comics. And so I'm really trying to be, honestly, like, I try not to buy too many comics anymore, because I need to, until I ever get a point of catching up, I'm not going to, I just really don't want to keep trying new books, because honestly, by the time I get to issue 1, which I've had for, 18 months, like, either I don't like it and I don't care, or I love it and it's popular, and then, like, every other issue costs, like, $1 billion, and I don't feel like dealing with that. So that's where I'm at with that. But I was happy to get, I really like that they often will, like, give you the trade arcs. And so, again, even though, like, I didn't love it, I think Mad Cave is definitely a studio to watch, because they have some really good series coming out. And then the last thing I read was Get It Out, The Politics of Hysterectomies, and This was okay. I just didn't really learn anything, and I was kind of like hoping I would learn more. I mean, again, women's health is something that, I mean, am interested in women's health, but also, like, I have to be interested in women's health, for my own health reasons. And so, I guess I just was like, I've probably spent a lot of time already looking up stuff about this, so, I think it's interesting if you don't know anything about it. I just was kind of like waiting for like, oh, maybe I'll learn something more, but I just kind of was like, oh, I already know all this, so, but, if you don't, it's interesting. So that's what I read. So, I mean, a couple really good ones, a couple I really didn't like, and then a lot of just sort of like middle of the road stuff. I've had a couple books I've really liked so far this year, but I just haven't had like one of those that like kicks you in the face and you're like, oh my God, this is the best book I've ever read. So, I'm really hoping, going into April, that last year I had a few of those in like the first couple months of the year. So you never know. I mean, you don't always get that, and I'm really hoping over the next few months, but right now I've just been, I don't know. So I have the readathon coming up, and so that will like force me to read a bunch of books, and so maybe one of them will really work for me, but I'm sorry, I don't mean to be yawning at you people. I'm sorry. Maybe one of those will work for me, but yeah, if not, I think, I mean, I'll probably still do the July readathon, but I think May and June, I'm just gonna maybe try to pick like a classic or something like that might be a little more intense, and just focus on reading like the one book or something for the month, try to, something that I might actually be really excited about, because right now I feel like I'm reading all these books and I'm just sort of like, meh. Anyway, that's where I'm at. That's what I read for the last couple of months, and I think Sir Chunk might do one at some point too. And then we'll probably both do, we're both doing the readathon, so this is his first one, so we'll see how he does. He's like, I'm not going to do any of this, and it's frustrating, because I'm like, no, I want to get points. I like to win, so we'll see how well he does. To be fair, I mean, he doesn't, he has to teach and stuff, so it can be tough. Anyway, see you around. Bye.